if you take 100 millimeters of your ceiling height and squeeze your structural slab down by an extra 100 millimeters, gaining 200 millimeters on each 27 floors gains you 5.5 meters overall. That's enough to add 2 extra floors on top, and that's what we did. Ben's top 10 design tips for your developments. Top tip number 1, creating efficient floor plates. That's maximizing your gross saleable space, basically, of each floor plate by reducing stair cores, squeezing hallway spaces, and doing anything you can to just remove any dead space. Regularization, that means taking bathrooms, shower rooms, utility rooms, making them as regular as you possibly can throughout every flat, so that every tiler that goes into your bathrooms knows that you've got only 2 different types. He does one, he learns how to do it faster, he doesn't have any issues, he learns any issues on the first one and can just roll them out on the rest of the property. Amending ceiling heights can make a huge difference. In the 27-story tower that we had in the Berkeley Group scheme that I worked on, if you take 100 millimeters of your ceiling height and squeeze your structural slab down by an extra 100 millimeters, gaining 200 millimeters on each floor, each 27 floors, gains you 5.5 meters overall. That's enough to add 2 extra floors on top, and that's what we did. Every floor was 6 flats, so we gained an extra 12 flats in that 27 tower by just being more lean and more clever, I guess, with the actual ceiling heights that we had within that envelope. Number 4, changing the development mix, so understanding what's best in what location, so rearranging a 2-bed in one part of the building that has the best views, as opposed to having 2 2-beds that might be lower value, maximizing instead of a 3-bedroom flat, maybe changing that to 1 2-bed and 1 1-bed, rearranging the development mix to suit the scheme. And we've come unstuck with one of our schemes recently where the planners wouldn't allow us to get the development mix and the type of scheme that we wanted, and it's really hurt us. We wanted to get an extra flat in the loft space at Sunset Court, but the planners wouldn't have it. So we had to end up with 2 large 3-beds, 1 split level 3-bed duplex, which is overpriced for that area and not really the type of finished asset that we wanted. Sometimes the planners get in the way, but you should be looking at maximizing how that development mix is suited, whether it's 1-beds, 2-beds, 3-beds. External facelifts can have a massive impact on the overall saleability and curb appeal of your properties. Don't overlook storage, because it is key. Utilizing changes of use. Obviously, there's a lot of permitted development rights now that help you do that. So try to understand those permitted developments, understand the nuances, use them where you can. It really does help you maximize efficiency. Always have a focus on the end customer. The Berkeley Group were very keen that they created products, that what they created was a product. It wasn't a property, it was a product. It has to be customer focused, and you have to basically cater to customers' needs to sell faster and sell high. Amenity space, certainly since the pandemic, private amenity space is so fundamental for every property that you have. You should try and factor that into every unit that you possibly can. It's not always possible. Where you can, you absolutely try and should. Point number 10, which I think is most important, that's why it's big and in red, challenge your architect and your consultants. I was probably the little 3-year-old boy in the Berkeley Group design team meetings that just constantly having his hand up. Why are we doing that? Why are we doing it? Yes, but why? Yes, but why? Yes, but why? And ultimately, after about 3 times of asking that, you often found that your engineer sort of sat back and said, we can do that. Okay, well, why didn't you do that first time round? That's where you need to get to. You need to be really, really pushing your design consultants and really challenging what they do. Cool. So I've got a presentation where I can go through a few more of those things in finer detail and show you how we've managed to put these into practice in some of our Aura schemes and also in some of the XP schemes that we've worked on. Efficiency in floor plates. And what I mean by that is basically creating and removing lots of wasted dead space. So you can see on this left-hand image, for those that are looking on YouTube, there are huge cycle stores internally, huge utility and plant rooms, a massive entrance hallway, which looks to be about 3 meters wide. I mean, that's just huge waste of space. So try and streamline the communal space as much as you possibly can. It doesn't need to be any bigger than it needs to be from a sort of compliance perspective. You might want to put a slightly nicer hallway in somewhere in some locations, but certainly not 3 meters wide and certainly not in a block of 9 flats that this was. So you can see that you've got 2 flats that are only about 50 square meters, but by reducing the stair cores, being a little bit more clever in terms of how that communal space looks, we managed to take a 50 square meter flat and turn it into a 69 square meter flat. Is a good size 2-bed effectively from a 1-bed. Those that are BDI'd of you and really sort of either pause the screen to look at properties, and we'll notice that the floor plans on the right hand side are actually a HMO. So this particular client that came to us, as a HMO investor, they were looking to hold these assets. So we were trying to optimize for bedrooms as opposed to optimizing for sort of saleable flats. So yeah, that would be why it's sort of organized that way. But the crux of it is that we've gone from 50 square meters to 69 square meters without extending the building. We're just utilizing the space internally far better. This all comes down to increasing your NIA to GIA ratio. So a good efficiency for a block of flats might be somewhere between 85 and 90%. When we took our St Andrew's Court Tame project on the office conversion, I think the original architect designed it at about 73% efficiency. So that's 27% basically of wasted space. You need to have stair calls, you need to have communal areas, but fundamentally, if you're designing something efficiently, somewhere around 85 to 90% is a good place to aim for. So if you're pushing your architects, throw that figure at them, make sure that they are being really conscious and clear as to what the NIA versus GIA ratio is, and then drive them down where you can. So how have we used that in practice? This is a project that we sort of joint ventured on down in Canterbury. On the right hand side in the image that you see on the screen is a previous architect they were working with. We took over the scheme, utilized a lot of the points that I mentioned in my top 10 design tips. We really increased the NIA versus GIA ratio, stripped down a lot of the stair cores and wasted space. We regularized and standardized the bathrooms. So if you look at this bathroom here, which is circled, you can fit 2 bathrooms in that space. It's absolutely huge. All of the units and sanitary wares like bunched up into one side, and it's just not a very good efficient use of space. So that's something that we would regularize straight away. My bathrooms are typically 1700 by 21 in width, 1700 in terms of the length of a bath, and then 21 width is enough to get bath, toilet, sink side by side and still have quite a lot of space available. Sometimes I'll increase that to 1900 by 2100, where the 200 mil extra is effectively the void behind the units for niches to hide all of your ductwork, to recess, semi-recessed sinks, make it feel a lot more luxurious. My shower rooms, if they're arranged like that, are 2.1 meters in length, and then effectively the minimum I'd go down to is probably 1200 for a shower tray in terms of the width of that shower room. But we generally have a standardized 4 or 5 different types of bathrooms and shower arrangements, and we replicate that in most of our schemes. You'll see on the next page how we amended ceiling height. So we reduced some of the upper level floors to get an extra floor in the roof space, and this is something that we always look to do. The old Maltings is a classic example of that, where we've added over £500,000 worth of value by utilizing loft space, putting in an extra floor, getting Velux windows in the roof, maybe adding some dormers and adding value in those voids and volumes. We changed the development mix, so we took some 3 beds, made a 2 bed and a 1 bed, or just played around with how that mix looked. If you can sneak a 1 bed into a 2 bed by gaining back some of that communal space, for example, is a great way of also adding value. And then fundamentally, this was a change of use. So this utilized permitted development to convert the upper levels of this retail space into residential flats. December 2019 was when we looked at this first time round. The GDV was 1.15 million based on the 5 units that the previous architect had designed. This is the sort of sketches that we came up with to kind of optimize and maximize the space. You can see a section on the right hand side where we've lowered floors to get an extra floor into the roof space. We took it up to 6 units because of those changes, took the GDV up to 1.34 million, increased the profit margin by 16%, again by just, that's a paperwork exercise, just looking at optimizing the space, getting a 16% increase in profit margin. Later, as we developed the scheme even further, we realized we could get more additional space up in the rear section of the building, up in the loft. We had a proper measured survey to work to. You can see it's gone from kind of sketch level to CAD drawings where we've actually got proper measurements, and we can add even more value. So we've gone from 5 units to 6 units to 7 units at a £1.48 million GDV. Ultimately, we took the projected profit on the project from £240,000 to £410,000 with that paperwork exercise. So a 72% increase in profit margin by running that process, getting your architects, getting your design consultants to really squeeze as much value out of it as possible. This project is for a huge scheme in Croydon, which I absolutely love, and it's almost finished. So I do need to get to site to actually see how this one has panned out. But ultimately, the site came to us with planning approval for a conversion to 6 units. Now, they were massive units and they were oversized, and you could have squeezed probably 10 out of them, to be honest. But it came to us with 6. But we realized by amending ceiling heights, digging down only about 1200 millimeters into the ground, you can actually get an extra sort of split level mezzanines in there, extra net saleable area. We took those those 6 oversized units, adding the mezz spaces, digging down a little bit in the basement to 16 units. Basically, that added £1 million worth of value to our clients in that particular project. And not only that, did we get planning approval for a block of 8 flats, which you can see on screen. The cream on the top was actually, I think, once they started the works, they actually managed to go back in and get an extra bungalow in this part of the site as well. So from what was 6 units approved when they bought the site to effectively 25 units by the time they got through to construction. I mentioned changing use. So this is something we did in the business box in Reading, which used to be effectively like a storage unit for bride and groom dresses and tailoring and things like that. So effectively we bought it as a storage at £8 a square foot, turning that into an office space and just changing the use. It took us up to £22 a square foot. And then with offices like this, it was about 3,500 square feet of space. We chopped it up into smaller pods of 350 to 600 square feet. And that actually ramped up the price per square foot significantly from the £22 a square foot if we let it as one big office to £30 to £40 a square foot is what we actually achieved in rental values by chopping it up into the smaller pods. Facelifts are always great to increase curb appeal, adding little porches and changing the textures and the materials of the properties. We did this really successfully with the police office project in Sonning Common, increasing the curb appeal and increasing the value of those assets. And then one of the really, really sort of big things that I learned at the Berkeley Group, talking about kind of being customer focused, is top golden tip, basically not getting your hand wet when you turn on your shower. That was a pet peeve of mine. It's something that we try to do in every scheme that we do now. So nobody wants to reach into the shower, turn on the shower valve, get wet hand, have to dart out the way really quickly. Your shower valves should be in a position where you can reach them without getting your hand wet. That was always one of the golden rules of the Berkeley Group. And the way that the Berkeley Group always thought about their properties was very similar to Apple. When you get an Apple phone, an iPhone, you just know it works. It's intuitive. You don't really ask many questions. You just turn it on and kind of know how to use it because it's super user friendly. What the Berkeley Group are very, very good at doing is you move into a house and you don't have those niggles. You don't have this, why is that in this place? Or why does that look like that? Because most of the time, everything's been thought through. Everything's been thought through in terms of how the space is used. I take pride of the fact that I've had those sort of similar comments from agents of some of the stuff that we've sold. Agents have walked in and they can see how the thought process has gone into how the rooms are laid out and the spaces are arranged and all that sort of stuff. And I just think it's so important. I want people to move into our flats and not question anything, because if they're not questioning anything and they can just live their lives and enjoy living there, you've done a really good job in creating a house that's of value to them. So yeah, have a real customer focus on what you do. And I skipped storage, sorry. There are space standards around how much storage you need to provide, but everyone has loads of shit nowadays. You need to create some tailored and dedicated storage for people to use. And then in this day and age, private amenity, we are installing things like balconies, terraces, and sort of courtyard gardens in a lot of our schemes where we can. Most of those balconies, for example, probably add 15 to 20 grand to our house values. It costs us probably £6,000 to £8,000 to install a lot of those. You're almost doubling or trebling the value that you can get from getting those approved at planning. So private amenity is huge. That's it. If you've got any questions about adding value to your developments through design, very just quickly, point number 1, efficient floor plates, regularization, amending ceiling heights, changing the development mix, giving it an external facelift, utilizing storage, changing the use, having a real focus on customers and what they need, amenity space, and then to challenge your architect and consultants.